Okay, so let's talk about the JSP directives now. Similar to the other JSP elements which we discussed earlier, JSP directives also has got its own tags. So whatever you put in these tags will be considered as JSP directives, right? And these are certain pre-processing commands given to the JSP engine. And this command should be processed before the JSP can be translated to a servlet, right? So unlike the other JSP elements, you do not write some Java code or some kind of business logic in JSP directives, but you give some commands to the JSP engine. So we are going to see in a bit what those commands are actually are, and how do you implement them, and what are the uses of it, right? So we just said that we use it for providing some commands to the JSP engine. And why do you need JSP directives? To incorporate certain additional features into the JSP. So how the JSP basically behaves, the behavior of the JSP. So when we say that we are incorporating certain additional features to the JSP, we mean that we are modifying the servlet behavior generated. So we know that ultimately a JSP translated to a servlet. So JSP in its terms doesn't really have any meaning, right? So when we are saying we are modifying something in the JSP, that means we are actually changing certain behavior in the servlet which is generated from the JSP at the end, right? And we can include certain other JSP and HTML files, and we can provide tag libraries. So we are going to see what tag libraries are and how do you use them and what its uses are. Okay, so this is a basic example of a JSP directive. So this is a JSP page directive, right, where I'm importing the java.util.arraylist class file. Okay, there are three different types of JSP directives, and so first page directive. So the first JSP directive is the page directive, right? So whatever you put in a page directive is basically applied to the current JSP page on which we are currently associated to. Okay, so when it comes to the directives, the second element is also very much important. So whatever you put after the JSP directive tag is of importance as well, right? So I put here page, so that means that this is a page directive. So I just told you that there are three different types of JSP directives: page directive and the other two directives, right, which we will discuss later. And the second element is going to tell us what type of directive it is. So when I say whatever percentage ampersand percentage at the rate and then I say page, that means that this is a page directive, and these are the different things I can do using a page directive, right? So basically you can provide a number of predefined attributes and its values in a page directive, and this is going to affect the page and the servlet in the end as well, right? So these are the only a few of the attributes, few of the important attributes which you can use using a page directive, and we'll see how it actually affects the JSP after the application of this page directive, right? So the first thing is page import. So basically whenever you want to import certain classes, certain class files into your JSP, you use the page directive JSP import. You use the page directive import, right? So let's say that you're working on some business logic in your servlets class, and you're using certain packages and classes in the util package or some other classes, right? So what do you do when you use them? You basically import those classes, whatever you are using in your file. Similarly, we know that a JSP is ultimately converted to an servlet, right? And we do write scriptlets in our JSPs where we use certain other classes and utility packages as well, right? So as a earlier example we saw, we probably have used ArrayList class in my JSP scriptlet, right? When it is converted to a servlet, if there is no import, it's probably going to be throw an error, right? Because I'm using an array list class, but I've not imported that class. So how do you import in the JSP? You import using the page directive, right? So this is how you do it. You say import java.util.arraylist, right? Next attribute is the content type. The default content type would be HTML, right? Because most of the time whatever you send back to the client is an HTML page. But you need to know that not only HTML, but you can send back the client a bunch of different files, right? You can send the client a jar file, you can send a image, you can send a video, you can send a zip file, and a number of other file types which you can send to the client back, right? And the content type basically determines what type of file you are sending back to the client, right? Is thread safe? What does it mean? You know that servlets are, they work in a multi-threaded environment, right? So that means there's only one servlet instance, and whenever new request comes in for the servlet, it basically spawns multiple threads, right? And it is basically assumed that by default you are thread safe. It is thread safe. Servlets are thread safe because it is assumed that you are writing your code in a thread safe manner, so that one particular change made in one thread doesn't affect the other thread, right? So if there are any instance variables in threads in the servlet and you are trying to modify those variables, so the change made by one thread is visible to the other thread, right? In that case your servlet is not thread safe. So by default it is assumed that you implement some best practices in your code and you don't do such things, and your servlets are thread safe, right? But if you feel that your servlet is not thread safe, you should say that is thread safe is false. So by default it is true, but if you don't want to make it thread safe, if you feel that your servlet is not thread safe, you will have to say is thread safe is false. And when you say that, what the engine is going to do is it's going to implement the single threaded model for your particular servlet, which is generated from this JSP, right? It basically is going to make the service method synchronized. So that means only one thread can enter the service method at one particular time, right? Okay. Session. So it determines whether you can use the current HTTP session or not. Okay, so by default it is true, and if you don't want to use the session, you can say false. Buffer, auto flash, and these are some of the other attributes you can use. And one important attribute is error page and error page, right? So when you say error page and you give some page name, some JSP or HTML page name, whenever there is an error in this current JSP page, it's going to take you to that particular error page defined in error page attribute. And one thing, and how does it know that that particular page is an error page or not? So I say error page is equal to er.jsp, right? And when I write my er.jsp, I'll have to give a page directive attribute is error page and value of true. By default it is false, so that means that every page is considered as a normal JSP page. But if you want to make your JSP page an error page, you will have to say is error page is equal to true, which will treat it as an error page, right? So these are some of the attributes you can use in a JSP page directive, and we just saw that how on application of these directives we can change the behavior of the generated servlet. Okay, good. So next page directive is the include directive, right? So similarly the include directive will have an include as the name in the second element after the tags. Again we say include file is equal to whatever file you want to include in this page, right? So let's take an example. We know that in any web application there will be a number of different pages. So let's say that I have 100 pages in my web application, right? And oftentimes there are certain common areas in every page, and those common areas would be header and footer regions, right? So most of the times I'll have the same header and same footer in all the pages, right? And writing the code for header and footer in each and every page is not a best practice in general, because if you want to change the header or footer text or anything in the header or footer, you will basically have to make changes in each and every page, which is not the best thing to do, right? So what you basically do is you write a separate header and footer page, and you put whatever text you want to write in the header and footer. And if at all you want to make any changes to the header or footer, you simply change the header.jsp or footer.jsp and you are done. So you're only going to make change at one place, as opposed to making changes in 100 places. And what you do then is you add this header and footer pages in every page you want to make use of it, right? So you basically include these header and footer pages, and you can include these pages using the include directive, right? So this definitely is very helpful to us, right? And it saves a lot of time for us. So one thing to note here is the inclusion of the header and footer files or inclusion of the sub file into the main file is done at the translation time. So what is this translation time? The translation time is the time where your JSP is translated to a servlet, right? So the first time I write my main page, add the header and footer files, and I compile it, it's going to translate at the time of call. It's going to translate my JSP page to a servlet, and my servlet is going to be loaded into the memory, right? But let's say that one issue here that could occur with this. Let's say that I included my header and footer in my main page, right? And I rendered the page. Now later, if I had to change the header.jsp file, so initially it was hello username, and I want to change it to hi username. So I simply modify the header.jsp and save it. Will this affect my main page? Will I see hi username here? No, because my main page was translated into a servlet even before the header.jsp made its change, right? So whatever changes made here will not be reflected in my main page. So if I want that change as well to reflect in my main page, what I need to do is I again need to recompile my main page, so that it's going to take whatever latest from the subpages, that is header and footer.jsp, and then it's going to translate it into a servlet again and then render that to the user, where I will see hi username, right? So this is about the JSP include directive. And the last and the most important tag directive we have is a Taglib directive. So basically here we provide certain tags in your JSP pages, and implementing the Taglib directive is going to help a lot, because it's going to clean up your JSP page. It's going to look more pretty, and it's going to get a lot of load off your shoulders as well. So if a lot of common custom logic which you have in your application can be written in a Taglib directive, and you simply use that Taglib directive in your JSP pages instead of again writing all those logic repeatedly in each of the page. So let's discuss what are the components involved in the tag libraries, so that we get a more clear picture on what tag libraries are and how do you use the Taglib directive and why it is used. So just the Taglib directive syntax looks something like this. We have the directive syntax and then followed by Taglib, and we have URI and prefix. So we'll see what it really means. Okay. So the very different components involved in tag libraries are the tag handler class, the descriptor configuration file, and the Taglib directive. Okay. So now let's say that we just have a common set of functionality which will be used in each and every page in my application. So what I do is I put this common chunk of code in a certain file, right? And I'll use this common code in multiple JSP pages. Okay. So that common place where I'm putting the common logic is the tag handler class, right? So this is the place where I put the common custom logic and HTML generation. Okay. And I use the Taglib directive in my JSP page to invoke the class which is implementing the common logic. Now there has to be some bridge between the Taglib directive in my JSP file and the actual tag handler class. So for that reasons I have the descriptor configuration file, right? So this is nothing but the properties mapping file which has got information about the tag libraries and the tag handler class and what are the different properties you can set for the tag libraries. Okay. So let's see here an example where I show all the different pages and classes and files involved in a tag library and how each file is connected to the other file, right? So the first thing is my test.jsp. Okay. So here what I did is I have a common logic for displaying the text box. So in my application, whenever someone wants to use a text box in the JSP page, they shouldn't use the predefined text box present in HTML, whatever input, right? But they'll have to use the JSP tag called Sharman's text box to add a text box in their HTML or JSP file, right? So let's say that I provided some logic for that, and that logic is present in the text box tag.java. Okay. So we'll have a look at the whole life cycle of a tag handler and all those things. What are the different tag handlers you can have, and the whole life cycle of a tag library in the future slides where we discuss tag libraries in more detail. But here I just wanted to show you the different components we have in place for tag libraries and how communication takes place between these components. Okay. So my custom logic for the text box representation goes in the text box tag, which is nothing but the tag handler class we discussed, right? And let's say that I have that logic in this particular class. Okay. Now in my JSP I need to use the logic present in this text box tag.java to represent my text box, right? So here I say I give the Taglib directive and I say URI is equal to Sharman's tags and prefix is equal to Sharman's, right? When I say URI, it means that it's a path to the tag libraries which I'll be using, right? And this path will be present in the web.xml, which is a configuration file for your servlets and JSPs, right? So when I say Taglib URI is equal to Sharman's, what the container is going to do is it's going to find this Sherman's tags in the web.xml file under the taglib element, right? So it's going to find this taglib URI with the name Sherman's tags. So it finds a match now. Okay, it says okay, I'm fine, I got a match there. Now it's going to see the taglib location, and it sees that the taglib location is Sherman's taglib.tld, right? Then it goes to Sherman's taglib.tld, which is a configuration file again, right, where we provide certain different configurations for the tag libraries. Okay, and within the Sherman's tag library I have different attributes, tag attributes I can use in this particular taglib, right? So we'll come to this again now. Before that, let's just complete with the test.jsp, right? So I said that I'm using the Sherman's tags taglib, right? And prefix can be anything. So whatever I put in prefix, I should use that prefix when I'm using certain features from the taglib, right? So when I say prefix is Sherman's, I'm using this Sherman's as a prefix on for every element where I want to use the taglib. And I say Sherman's colon text box. So here I am trying to use this text box. So we know that the taglib directory matched to this particular location, and now I'm going to use the text box taglib. Okay, so it's going to search for text box in the name in the Sherman's taglib.tld file, and it's going to see what is the corresponding tag class. Okay, and it sees that the tag class is text box tag, and it's going to find that text box tag and implement the methods in the basically call the methods present in the textbox tag.java, where I put all my custom logic for defining the text box in my page, right? So this is how the flow navigates between the different components and how your tag handler class is identified by the JSP pages, right? So this completes with the JSP Taglib, JSP directives.